Evidence of intelligent life on Mars, flowing rivers, active volcanoes, man-made structures, and NASA back at it again with photoshopping images and destroying data. It's all here, let's check it out. While it might not seem like it today, Mars used to have a pretty hospitable atmosphere. Furthermore, it wasn't always the red planet. In fact, at one point it was actually pretty blue. Yes, current Mars is cold and inhospitable, but dry riverbeds and minerals that form only when liquid water is present indicate that once, long ago, Mars had an atmosphere capable of retaining enough heat to support oceans and maybe even life. But just how Earth-like was Mars? Well, isn't that the question we are all just dying to know the answer to? Furthermore, how did it become the barren desert we all know and are so incredibly intrigued by today? Up until around 4 billion years ago, Mars had a strong magnetic field, much like Earth, that contributed to its dense atmosphere that works like a greenhouse to trap the sun's light. While this is not a definitive fact, scientists believe this to be true because of modern-day observations of convection currents of molten metals located in the planet's core. As the planet's core began to cool, however, the magnetic field began to weaken, eventually to the point where Mars could no longer trap heat or protect itself from solar winds, streams of energetic charged particles flowing from the sun that have extremely high levels of radiation. In just a few 100 million years, these solar winds would have stripped away the majority of Mars's atmosphere, likely killing anything that had once lived there. While a few 100 million years might not sound fast, in the scheme of things it was actually incredibly quick. And the reason it took such a short amount of time was because, in its youth, the sun rotated much faster than it does now. And as a result, hundreds of millions of years ago, its solar winds were also much more energetic and therefore destructive. So, in the cosmic blink of an eye, Mars went from warm, wet, and presumably hospitable to a cold, frozen, barren wasteland. But what was life on the planet like before all of that? Peaceful or a hotbed for natural disasters? I'll give you a hint, nothing is ever easy. A recent study conducted by NASA's Curiosity and Perseverance rovers has revealed that Mars, circa a couple 100 billion years ago, likely had a large amount of tectonic and volcanic activity. 63 new examples of various volcanoes located in a strange region of Mars with anomalous properties that set the region apart from the rest of the planet is ultimately what led scientists to this conclusion. The region, known as the Iridania region of Mars, is located in the planet's southern hemisphere. This region appears to have been shaped by activity within Mars's crust, aka volcanic activity. This is a huge step forward in understanding where to look for signs of ancient life on the red planet because, as was stated by Astor Cowart, a team member and planetary geologist at the Planetary Science Institute, the large basins in this region once hosted a lake system known as the Iridania Paleo Lake, which was up to around a mile deep when the lake was at its greatest extent, and long-lived volcanic sources next to abundant water may very well have fueled hydrothermal systems that could have nurtured life. Exciting stuff. With all that being said, it's really no surprise that many scientists believe that ancient bacteria might just be hiding directly underneath the surface of Mars, where it would have been kept safe from harsh radiation for the past millions of years. Exciting. According to an article written in October of 2022 by Ashley Strickland of CNN, quote, "While no evidence of life has been found on the red planet, researchers did simulate conditions on Mars in a lab to see how bacteria and fungi could survive. The scientists were surprised to discover that bacteria could likely survive for 280 million years if it was buried and protected from the ionizing radiation and solar particles that bombard the Martian surface today." End quote. The simple fact of knowing that bacteria could have survived on Mars, combined with the idea that Mars once held conditions that very well could have created and supported life, makes me pretty optimistic that one day, hopefully in the near future, we will find proof of what we've all been looking for. And we're already halfway there. In 2013, SAM, short for Sample Analysis at Mars, a suite of instruments on board NASA's Mars Science Laboratory rover, discovered organic compounds inside of sedimentary rock on Mars, as well as boron, which is a metalloid, which is an amazing discovery because the compounds discovered are precursors for prebiotic chemistry, which, alongside the discovery of liquid water having once existed on Mars, strongly points to the possibility of life having been present on the red planet at one point in history or becoming present within the next few million years or so as well. Furthermore, in 2018, NASA announced the detection of seasonal variations in methane levels found on Mars, which could be produced by microorganisms. The whole thing is super exciting and incredibly cool. Alright, now that we've covered the science behind life possibly having existed on Mars, let's talk about some of the less scientifically backed evidence showing signs of advanced civilizations having once existed on Mars so many millions of years ago. For starters, there is the famous and highly controversial image of the Mars face, located in a region of Mars known as the City. While NASA has claimed the perception of the face to be nothing more than pareidolia, a phenomenon in which humans perceive a specific, often meaningful image in random or ambiguous visual patterns, there are many people who just aren't buying it. Myself included. In fact, many experts, including Errol Turin, a professional satellite imaging specialist on differentiating natural versus man-made structures, have stated that there is no possible way the face could have formed naturally on the surface of Mars. It's just too perfect, too symmetrical, and too intentional. Furthermore, the famous face is not the only depiction of a face on Mars. In fact, many other photos from the Mars rover show what appear to be many other stone carvings with humanoid features. Now, I am well aware that this line of thought does begin to enter into the conspiracy theory realm, or it's already deep into the conspiracy theory realm, but there really are just too many uncanny formations on the surface of Mars for us not to be at least a little bit curious as to whether or not our mind is just really good at making faces where there aren't any, or if ancient Martians were just really good at carving faces that could last a couple 100 billion years. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I like to assume that in the realm of conspiracy theories, where there are aliens, there are pyramids. Luckily for you, my geometric-loving friends, Mars is no exception to that rule. In fact, you know that famous Mars face I showed you just moments earlier in a region of Mars known as the City? Well, right next to it, in an area known as the City Square, are what many geologists and scientists believe to be pyramids. Natural or otherwise? Now that's up for debate, but previously mentioned expert Errol Turin believes them to be man-made and incredibly impressive, especially the D&M pyramid, named after NASA imaging scientists Vince DiPietro and Greg Molinar. The D&M pyramid is a 5-sided, 1.5-mile tall structure, making it 3 times the size of the largest pyramid in Egypt. Furthermore, it's actually perfectly symmetrical on 2 separate axes, and it, along with the rest of the pyramids, appear to depict the placement of the Pleiades constellation. Many people believe a similar thing was done in Egypt with the Great Pyramids and the constellation Orion. Now, whether or not these structures and their placements are simply a fluke, or if they really were constructed by an ancient civilization living on Mars, you do have to admit they're still incredibly fascinating. Another highly debated formation found on Mars was discovered in May of 2022 by none other than the Curiosity rover. It is the highly controversial Mars Doorway, which is what appears to be an entrance of some sort carved into a rock face. While some people believe the depiction of a secret entrance to be some kind of trick of the light, or perhaps an aforementioned pareidolia effect, something about the precision of this supposed entrance has led many to believe that it is so much more than that. Now, here's where the conspiracy theories began to ramp right up. In 1993, after the launch of the Mars Observer probe, and 3 days before it was to be placed into orbit around Mars, a researcher named Richard Hoglan entered into a debate against the lead project scientist at NASA, Dr. Bevan French. Prior to the launch, NASA had wanted to exclude any kind of camera or image capturing device from the probe, but after a massive amount of public uproar, they agreed. But they claimed they still likely wouldn't use the camera, and that they definitely wouldn't be taking any photos of the Mars face or the surrounding pyramid-like structures. In response to this, during the debate, Hoglan stated that NASA had a set of data so extraordinary that it demanded testing. Therefore, it would be irresponsible not to capture and provide the public with further images of these structures. The rest of the debate doesn't really matter, because just 5 minutes after the interaction between Richard Hoglan and Dr. Bevan French, NASA released a report saying that the Mars Observer probe had disappeared. Kinda like how the moon landing footage disappeared back in 1969. Likely story. Here's the thing though, according to Hoglan, NASA insiders claimed that the observer was actually still out there, running just fine and even taking further photographs of the very structures the public were demanding to see, but that NASA just didn't want to release them. I wonder why. Fast forward to 1998. 5 years after the Mars Observer probe supposedly went missing, NASA launched a new probe, the Mars Global Surveyor, and they even attached cameras to it. Old, outdated cameras, despite having access to ones with much higher resolution. And then, they finally did it. NASA released a follow-up image of the famous face on Mars, a grainy, blurry, distorted image that later came out to be known as the cat box image. Speculation that the photograph had been doctored began almost immediately, and so an image specialist working at NASA decided to go back to the source data and attempt to reproduce the image. It was then that he realized that it had in fact been photoshopped to falsify the appearance of both the face and the formation surrounding the face, but this isn't the only time NASA has been caught falsifying images. For years, NASA has actually been placing orange filters on photos taken of the red planet because they claim it gives the photograph a higher resolution. In reality though, the planet looks a lot more like Earth than one might think. The sky is more blue-gray than orange, and many of the rocks look exactly like ones found on Earth. If the filter really was for resolution, why wouldn't they have released both the altered and original images? Why did they wait for someone else to call them out? And what else are they really hiding? Alright you guys, that's it for today. I've been your host, Hannah Thompson. Stay safe.